Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 12th of January of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Sudzha direction, where according to information we have, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian positions and to take under control some 3 lines in Ukrainian fortifications along the border. And this is the first case probably since 2022 when the Russians officially crossed the border between Ukraine and Russian Federation. As you can see in this video, there are a lot of episodes of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking the concentrations of Russian forces along the line of combat contact. And this is a very interesting video because currently we don't know for sure what exactly we've just seen, whether this the preparation of the Russian armed forces to begin offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Yunakivka, or it's just an attempt to attract Ukrainian attention in this direction with the purpose to reduce their possibilities, their defense possibilities on the territory of Sudzha. Anyway, if you ask my opinion, I believe that the Russians most likely will try to attack the settlement of Veselovka, Belovody, and at least the settlement of Yablunovka from the direction of Uspenovka, and most likely the Russians will try to attack the villages of Volodimirovka and the next village of Novomykolaivka and Varachine from the settlement of Gordievka. If the Russians are able to take these territories under complete control, if the Russians have enough of forces to complete this offensive operation, then the situation for the Ukrainians is going to become a complete disaster on the territory of Sudzha, because the main supply road between the Sudzha itself and Ukrainian positions in the city of Sumy would be cut off by the Russians completely without any possibilities for establishing more or less reliable logistic. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, before the Trump's inauguration, we are going to see a lot of events, a lot of updates. Today we got also another report that Trump and Putin are preparing for a meeting to discuss the security, the new order in the world, and obviously they're going to talk about Ukraine itself. And I believe that Zelensky will do everything he can but not allow this meeting to happen, not because he doesn't want the war to be finished on the territory of Ukraine. He can't accept that anybody in the world will talk about Ukraine without Ukraine, and for him it's the question of his honor to stop and to not allow this meeting to happen. So I believe that during the next week, during the next 7 days, we are going to see a lot of provocations from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the north in Sudzha direction, where according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to get a little bit closer to the settlement of Novaya Sorochina. In this video that was published by the Ukrainian side, we can see lots of FPV drone strikes on the Russian stormtroopers that were moving, that were heading towards the village of Novaya Sorochina. One of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point. Based on this video, we have turned the contested area into the territory under complete Russian control. We believe that the Russians indeed managed to capture everything that is in contested zone, but as for now we are waiting for additional geolocations. As for the northern Sudzha direction, today according to information we have, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Kositsa. So I'll remind you that during the previous several days there were very heavy clashes on the territory of Ruskaya Porechная. Basically the territory of Ruskaya Porechная was captured and secured by the Russians on the 10th of January of 2025, and today, 2 days later, we got report that the Russians secured Kositsa. As you can see, the dynamic of the Russian offensive is very big. They are planning to move further in the southern direction. I believe we should expect the beginning of the battle for the settlement of Cherkasskaya Porechная. According to different sources, even according to neutral mappers, at least the northeastern part of Cherkasskaya Porechная is under complete Russian control. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for the southeastern part of the Sudzha direction, there are still very heavy clashes between the Ukrainians and the Russians on the territory of the settlement by the name of Makhnovka. The Ukrainians managed to stabilize the northern part of Makhnovka by redeploying additional forces in this area, and all reports that we got several days ago that the Russians managed to secure the village of Makhnovka completely were just speculations and wishful thinkings. As for now, there are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are not counting losses. They are bringing more and more forces in this area. Now let's move further, and probably we are coming to the most important area where we are receiving the most interesting updates. Let's talk about the Kupyansk direction. Today, the Russians, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, reported that the group of forces West managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Kalinovo in the Kharkiv region. And when talking about map, this is former Soviet village. As for the 21st century, there are nothing left from this village, just ruins and fields and trees, and that's it. But the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation was talking exactly about this part of the Kharkiv region. So according to them, the Russians, as a result of attack, managed to defeat the Ukrainians in this area and to force them to fall back. And this is very interesting information because since the beginning of December, the Russians intensified their activity in this area. First, the Russians were attacking the village of Novomlinsk, but in December, the Ukrainians managed to carry out several counterattacks, and most likely as a result of those counteroffensive operations, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the settlement. Then the Russians decided to move further in the western direction from the village of Masutovka, and during the December, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly, and the Russians took under control the forest by the name of Parnyanske and the forest by the name of Varnyanske. So these territories, this huge bridgehead was taken by the Russians in December and the early January. Also, during the same period of time, we were receiving lots of updates that there were very heavy clashes on the territory of Dvorechna. According to different sources, the Russians control up to from, let's say, 30 till 80% of the settlement of Dvorechna. So, and today we got report that the Russians established control over Kalinovo. Now we can calculate the Russian foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river Oskol, and summarizing everything, the length of the Russian positions is already more than 10 kilometers, and telling the truth, this is enough to begin a full-scale offensive operation in the western direction, and this is enough, these territories are enough to take under control few more villages to the west of this foothold. The situation for the Ukrainians is very critical, and this Russian offensive tell us that most likely the Russians are not planning to attack the city of Kupyansk itself in front. The Russians are going to outflank the city from the north. Furthermore, today we got another very interesting report. We got several reports from the settlement of Krugliakovka and Sinkovo. Today the Russian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the settlement with FPV drones. A lot of FPV drone attacks, as you can see, lots of episodes, and most of them were taking place along the river of Oskol. This is very important from one perspective. There is nothing interesting, nothing special, just regular activities, but telling the truth, I believe that the Russians are going to outflank the city of Kupyansk not just from the north. I expect that due to this attack, the Russians will try to cross the river of Oskol in the area of Sinkovo, and they will try to take under control this village as well, and to create a foothold on this side of the river Oskol in this part of the river, and from these positions, the Russians may try to attack in the northern direction with the purpose to outflank the city of Kupyansk from the south. So anyway, everything depends, of course, on the 20th of January. Everything depends on the talks between Trump and Putin, on the results of these talks. But telling the truth, despite the fact and despite the results of these talks, the Russians will continue the special military operation until the papers between Ukraine and Russia are signed. And the most important, Putin is not going to sign anything with Zelensky. First, he will demand the president elections on the territory of Ukraine, and when talking about president elections, these are another 6 months, and only then something will be signed. And telling the truth, everything might happen during these 6 months. Everything. Now let's move further. As for additional updates from the central Kupyansk direction, today, according to different pro-Russian resources, as a result of offensive operation, the Russian stormtroopers managed to reach the outskirts of the settlement of Zeleny High. Let's wait for additional details and updates, but if this information is correct, then the situation for the Ukrainians in this area is becoming critical. Now let's discuss the situation in the Chasiv Yar direction. Today we got lots of very interesting updates from this territory. The most important is that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Verikhovo-Vasilievka. This information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian mappers and by neutral mappers. Very interesting situation, and we don't know for sure what exactly the Russians are trying to achieve by this attack. Either they're planning just to reach the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal, along its canal and along the vicinity of the village of Novomarkovo, or the Russians Russians have begun today offensive operation with the purpose to outflank the city of Siversk from the southwest and from the west. So let's wait and see. The most important updates are coming, of course, from the city of Chasiv Yar. Today, as you can see, another day in a row, we are receiving lots of geolocations from the central part of the settlement. The Russians answer the active phase of assault operation. They're trying to attack everything. And today we got a very interesting article that was published by pro-Ukrainian service Deep State. Today they reported that the situation in Chasiv Yar is not just bad, the situation is worse than never. That was stated by pro-Ukrainian sources. Also, the Deep State reported that in the upcoming hours we should wait for a major general update of Deep State map exactly in the area of Chasiv Yar. And the pro-Ukrainian source telling us that the situation, that this update is going to be in Russian favor, and this update is going to be very, very huge and very unpleasant for pro-Ukrainian side. So what does it mean? I'll remind you that during the January we got lots of updates that first the Russians managed to encircle the Ukrainians in the micro district of Novy and in this forest. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to encircle the Ukrainians on the territory of the industrial zone and high-rise building area. And we were talking that the Russians launched another offensive operation. We were talking about ultimatum. We were talking about the Russian progress already on the territory of the industrial zone. But while all these talks, while all these discussions, we haven't received almost anything from this area regarding map changes, but obviously the map was changing. So we are waiting for Deep State update, and very likely that the northern part of the city of Chasiv Yar has collapsed completely, and everything including the northern micro districts, the central part and the forest were captured by the Russians without any chances for the Ukrainians to restore control over these territories. One important thing we need to understand, that if this information is correct, if everything that was stated by Deep State is correct, then we are going to see another flower in the area of the special military operation, and this is going to be the flower of the city of Chasiv Yar. And telling the truth, from positions of this flower, the Russians will be able to take everything to the west and to the northwest, and the city of Konstantinovka will be captured by the Russians much faster than any other town or settlement during the special military operation, because not just because of the city of Chasiv Yar and Russian advantageous positions, just also because the city of Toretsk was already captured by the Russians as well, and the city of Konstantinovka would be attacked by the Russians from three directions: from the city of Chasiv Yar, from the city of Toretsk, and along M32 road from the southwestern direction. As for the city of Toretsk, today almost every single day this week we've been receiving lots of updates from pro-Ukrainian sources about very difficult and critical situation in the city of Toretsk. The Ukrainians start talking that this Toretsk is not important, that this is another ruins during the war, so it's better to save servicemen, it's better to retreat towards more reliable positions. So the society of Ukraine is being prepared to that this city is going to be abandoned by the Ukrainians in the very near future. So as for me, I believe that the city of Toretsk was already captured by the Russians. The Ukrainians are not telling this because they understand that every single day for them is better without any bad news than let's say to announce about this. And as for the Russians, I believe that they're waiting for the Trump's inauguration, and right before this inauguration the Russians will announce about complete control with the city of Toretsk, and they will publish several videos of flags, and these are going to be very strong arguments for Trump to stop supplying Ukraine and to force Zelensky to begin the negotiation process with Russia. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, and as you can see we have lots of flags in this area. Lots of sources reported that the village of Zelena was captured by the Russians completely, and telling the truth, right before we start making the video we got another geolocation with the Russian flag in this area. We still haven't geolocated the exact place where the flag was raised, but probably by the morning of the 30th of January we will adjust the map in Russian favor, and we will color the village of Zelena completely in Russian favor. There is another flower was created by the Russians and the Ukrainians on the territory of Shevchenko. Today, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation published the video of how the clashes and the fightings were taking place on the territory of the settlement. I'll remind you that the village of Shevchenko was captured by the Russians several days ago, and since that moment, the Russians were clearing the area, and most likely today or yesterday they finished the process, and now the settlement of Shevchenko is under complete Russian control, and this is going to be another flower in the very near future, and Shevchenko is going to bloom, obviously. And also it's very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainians would be able to stop the Russians after the bloom of this flower. According to information we have, the Russians continue their fast lightning attack in the direction of Kotlina and Udachne, and during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions once again. This information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian sources and by neutral sources. I'll remind you that the dynamic in this area is very fast. This is one of the fastest direction in the special military operation. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 7th of January. So the Russians, and this is the situation by the end of the 8th of January, almost no changes. And starting on the 9th of January, the Russians began their offensive operation. First, they secured the 3 lines between Salona and Vovka. Then the Russians managed to take under control additional positions to the west of Salona, and the village of Salona was cleared by the Russians completely. We came to this conclusion based on the geolocation that was provided by the Ukrainian side. On the 11th of January, the Russians managed to take under control several more 2 lines in the direction of the TO406 road and the railways between the main Ukraine, the mainland, and the Pokrovsk itself. And by the end of the 12th of January, the Russians secured the village of Novovasilievka completely, and they finished the battle for these facilities. So as you can see, the dynamic is very fast, and we understand based on this that this is the primary target for the Russians to cut the railways, and this is going to be another media victory for the Russians before the Trump's inauguration and the meeting between Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, and Vladimir Putin, the President of Russian Federation. Furthermore, the Russians continue their breakthrough in the direction of the Dnipro region, and during the previous 24 hours they managed to improve their position significantly in the fields between the Andreevka fortified area and the city of Pokrovsk. Lots of flags, as you can see. Different mappers updated their maps in Russian favor. The village of Nova Yelizavetovka was captured completely. The clashes are taking place on the eastern outskirts of Nadezhdinka. The Russians improved their positions in the settlement of Yasenevo. The Russians are advancing currently in the direction of the settlement by the name of Nova Alexandrievka. And the most important, the Russians managed to answer the heart of Andreevka fortified area, the settlement of Andreevka itself. At least this information was provided us by different pro-Ukrainian sources. According to them, the Russians managed to take under control dense network of the fortifications to the east of the settlement of Andreevka, and they managed to capture the most important stronghold, Company stronghold. And if this information is correct, then the Russians have no barriers in front of them to move further in the western direction along the Miru Street and to clear the village of Andreevka step by step from the east to the west. If this information is correct, and if indeed the stronghold was captured by the Russians, I believe then we can start counting days before the entire Andreevka falls. As for the Kurakhova direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement of Dachna. You know that the Russians every single day publish another video of how they are bombing this, how they bomb the territory of Dachna with multiple launch rocket systems, with artillery, with different types of artillery systems, and every single day we expect that this is exactly the offense, the preparation, the artillery preparation before another assault operation, but yet the Russians haven't started anything. Maybe this upcoming night they're going to do something, or maybe not, but now the chances that the Russians are going to begin the final offensive in the direction of Dachna is higher, because the settlement of Yantarne to the south of Dachna was captured by the Russians today completely, and we have 100% proofs of this. In this video we can see how 3 Russian soldiers were raising 2 Russian flags. One is the sign of Russian Union that was securing the territory, and another is the flag of the Russian Federation. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in this area in Russian favor, and now the Russians entered the operational space. The defense of this direction collapsed completely, and this is another flower that is going to bloom in the northern and the northwestern direction. So now we can expect that the battle for Dachna is about to be started, but the problem problem is for the Ukrainians that the Russians established complete FPV drone control along the M50 road between the village of Ulakli and the village of Dachna itself, and the Ukrainians have no chances to evacuate their assets from Dachna towards the mainland, just infantry and just on their own feet. As for the Velika Novoselovka direction, the pincers, the news is tightening around the village. Today, different mappers confirmed Russian control over the settlement of Niskuchna. This information was provided us by neutral mappers, and as pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians managed to take under control several tree lines along the way to the northeastern part of Velika Novoselovka. And these updates we got probably in the morning of the 12th of January, and most likely by the end of the 12th of January, the Russians managed to improve their positions. So we are waiting, we are expecting that by the morning of the 30th of January, we're going to receive additional changes on the ground around the settlement of Velika Novoselovka. So this is the situation, and the situation obviously developing not in Ukrainian favor. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Orekhov direction, telling us that most likely they are going to attack these areas as well. Let's wait and see. It's very important to see the results of Trump's and Putin negotiation process. Of course, it's very important to see this process not as something secret, but face to face on the territory of the neutral state. Some sources are saying that this might be Switzerland, but I'm not sure that Switzerland is good for Russia. There are very high chances that, according to ECC warranty, Putin might be arrested on the territory of Europe, and he will not trust any security guarantees provided by the Western countries. I believe that the meeting can take place, for example, on the territory of Belarus, or on the territory of Georgia, or on the territory of Kazakhstan, or I don't know, on the territory of China, or on the territory of the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, but not on the territory of Europe. So let's wait and see, but the situation for Ukraine is difficult. And once again, Zelensky doesn't like this idea of meeting between Trump and Putin without Ukraine. So I expect a lot of provocations during the next 7 days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.